This presentation is my descriptive respondent presentation surrounding interviewing children and adolescents, a chapter written by Eder and Fingerson. The key concept in this chapter is that when interviewing kids, researchers need to be aware of and actively work to mitigate the imbalanced power dynamics before, during, and after the interview when representing participants' voices. It's impossible for the researcher to claim an equal power status with the researched, so we need to be careful with our power. Some of the assumptions behind this argument in the chapter are that students and children and kids are often seen as less than adults, and especially in a school environment, researchers can be seen as an adult and an authority power, and students and kids may not respond authentically. Here are some interview tips and tricks that an interviewer can use when researching with children. Before conducting an interview, a researcher could think of children as their own minority group compared to the adults who order and control their lives, rather than viewing them as lacking essential abilities and characteristics of adulthood. Also, a brief period of observation should precede the interview, so that interviewers can identify natural contexts for interviewing and children's own speech routines. By using a particular mindset, and by understanding the context in which students are most comfortable before interviewing, interviewers are much more likely to get authentic responses from the kids that they interview, and also to reduce some of those power imbalances that the researchers for this chapter are concerned with. During an interview, a researcher should seek to create a natural context by interviewing students in group settings. This can reduce the power imbalance between the researcher and the participant by surrounding children with their peers. Also, children can build on each other's talk, and that can lead to a wider discussion of experiences and a more rich information environment for the researcher. Additionally, during an interview, an interviewer should be flexible with the types of questions, the method, and the setting. Interviewing children while they're engaged in an activity they normally do, like show and tell, circle time, recess, pretend games, or storytelling, can help to reduce the artificiality of interview. Kids can also interview each other. Tobias Hecht in 1998 wrote a research article about his methodology in which he gave students audio recorders and had them interview other students, thereby removing himself and his power imbalance that he would bring to the interview. Additionally, interviewers can start with unstructured questions to allow participants' concerns to emerge, continuing with non-directed, open, and inclusive questions afterwards. Interviewers should avoid questions that would remind participants of classroom lessons based on known answer questions, so that students do not feel like they have to give an answer that the adult expects. Also, interviewers should avoid correcting mannerisms as if they were the teacher. For example, telling a student to stop being silly or to stop fidgeting. Interviewers should encourage and allow students to even ask their own questions. Most importantly, during an interview, being an adult who is genuinely interested in a kid can be very empowering for that kid. Interviewers need to be very careful that they understand that their participants and that the researched in this case are actually human beings. Again, this looped back to the idea of seeing children as a minority group rather than people who are lacking in regards to adults. After an interview, interviewers can combine interviews with other methods such as field observations. They also can follow up with one-on-one interviews to address sensitive issues such as sexuality, self-esteem, and self-image. Additionally, the issue of reciprocity is important after an interview. Give the participants something in return for receiving the information, even if it's just a sense of empowerment or reciprocal self-disclosure during the interview. A community service done in cooperation with community members after an interview can also express thanks for that interview and help the participants and the children understand that you were not just seeing them as researched, that you were seeing them as whole human beings, and that you have the ability to help them. In representing their voices, use of a sociolinguistic analysis of interview data helps to address power dynamics, discourse, and conversational norms. It's also important when representing youth voices to represent the youth in their own terms, using their own words. Kids often refer to each other as kids, whereas adults refer to them as children. Using the word kids would represent authenticity. Using as many direct quotes, even including some of the verbal tics like the ums and the ahs, can do a much better job at representing the children's voices rather than representing an adult interpretation of those children's voices. Thank you.